Along everyone to the special meeting of Council for the 8th of September 2021. I welcome all of those in the room today and welcome all the people watching on our live stream media channels. I would like to open the meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. The Western Waka Waka, Gibel and Jarrawa people, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the traditions, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We have a couple of apologies. One is from Councillor Carl and the other is from Councillor Summerfield. And I believe Councillor Taylor is leaving at 2 o'clock. Councillor Taylor? 2:30, beg your pardon. No, it's 2 o'clock now. What am I saying? Do I need a motion to accept those? Yes. Can I have someone move those apologies? Councillor McDonald, Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? It's carried. We don't have any leave of absences required. I do have a declaration from Councillor Antonio. Did you want to read your declaration, Councillor?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wish to inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act of 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. This declarable conflict of interest arises because a person who is a related party of mine has an interest in the matter. The particulars are: the name of the related party is All Pair Proprietary Limited, trading as McLean Farms. The nature of the relationship with the related party is my cousin is the Chief Executive Officer of McLean Farms, and McLean Farms assisted in my campaign to run as Mayor at the last council elections. The nature of the related party interests in this matter are All Pair Proprietary Limited as the applicant for the development application. Madam Chair, I propose to leave the room and stay away from the place while this meeting is being held and while this matter is being discussed and voted on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor McMahon, did you have a declaration as well?
I just need to apply for a leave of absence, Chair, if I could. Just, Council, if I could put in a request now for a leave of absence for the special meeting that is at this stage only is scheduled, but scheduled to be on Wednesday the 29th of September, and the scheduled meeting that is proposed to be on Wednesday the 6th of October. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I have someone move Councillor McMahon's leave of absence? Councillor O'Shea, Councillor Shine, all those in favour? Lovely, thank you. We could back up a little bit because I forgot to acknowledge the Mayor, who is now gone, but I acknowledge you, Deputy Mayor McDonald, the General Manager. And today we have Mr Nick Hauser sitting in for our CEO, so thank you for being here today. All right, councillors, that takes us to the suspension of standing orders. Can I have someone move that we suspend standing orders? Councillor Von Hoff, seconded Councillor Carol Taylor. All those in favour? Thank you. So we move to item number 4, a material change of use impact, extension to extensive animal industry poultry farm and environmentally relevant activity for poultry farming located at 489 Volkers Road and 385 Felton Road, North Branch. Shakita, you are going to take us through it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. This application seeks approval for material change of use for extension to intensive animal industry at 489 Walkers Road and 385 Felton Road in North Branch. Kirsten, can we please bring up attachment 2? Thank you. It's just, it doesn't work for some reason for me. It is switched on. No, this is off. That's oh, that's off. Yeah. The site is located 13 kilometers southeast of Pittsburgh. For some reason, it doesn't bring up a whole image. And is comprised of 3 lots with a combined area of 473 hectares. The site has direct access to Homestead Road, and the surrounding rural area to the north and east is primarily used for livestock grazing and cropping. Land uses to south and west of the site include improved intensive animal industry, piggery farm, and approved composting facility. The subject site is located in the 100 hectares minimum precinct of the rural zone and is affected by agricultural land, bushfire hazard, environmental significance, and flood hazard overlays. The site generally falls to southwest with hills located in the center, north and east of the property. So I'll just go back. So in the center, north and east of the property. Stormwater drains along overland flow paths on site with discharge into either Hodson Creek to the east of the property, or to the Spring Creek to the east of the property, to the west of the property, sorry. The site contains a free-range poultry farm with a maximum capacity of 590,000 birds, which operates under development approval issued in 2015. The existing poultry farm includes 16 layer sheds and 1 rearing shed with the grading facility, connected via the internal road network. The existing use is approved to operate in accordance with site-based management plan, which outlines procedures for managing the impacts of noise, odor, dust, light, pests and vermin, waste, groundwater and surface water and soil. Manure is currently collected twice a week and taken off-site. At the end of the laying cycle of 66 weeks, sheds are cleaned and later removed off-site. The sheds are then swept clean and washed using a high-pressure gurney spray and disinfectant. The sheds are left open for water to evaporate with no discharge from the sheds. Biosecurity is maintained by a 1.8-meter electrified security fence constructed around the perimeter of the site. That's the perimeter of the whole site. The farm is currently operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with 20 full-time equivalent employee positions. The proposed extension to the existing poultry farm comprises 1 new layer shed with a gross floor area of 3,000 square meters to house 4,000 birds, new free-range area to the north and south of the proposed new shed, a conversion of an existing rearing shed to a layer shed that will house 9,600 birds. Kirsty, can we please open attachment 3? Thank you. Thank you. The proposed new layer shed is located approximately 380 meters from Homestead Road and 1,000 meters from Hayden Road. The new layer shed will have a similar build form to the existing sheds on the site. The shed will be 143 meters long and 21 meter wide and have a maximum height of 8.4 meters. The shed will be constructed on a concrete slab. The shed includes an aviary system and packing facility. Each aviary system has a series of nest boxes, and birds on each layer have access to feed and water along the length of the shed. Eggs roll from the nest boxes onto the conveyor belts and transported to the packing facility. Eggs collected on a daily basis, and under each shelf there is a manure belt that captures most of the manure deposited within the aviary system. Each side of the shed has 3 meter wide concrete strip along the length of the shed, as this area are highly utilized by birds and accumulates manure deposition. Further 10 meters from the concrete strips, there will be rubber mesh mats placed to allow for manure to settle through to the soil surface and protect the exposed surface from erosion. The proposed new layer shed will be managed in the same way as the existing sheds. Waste from the new shed is proposed to be managed in accordance with the existing site-based management plan. Daily mortalities will be removed from the shed daily and temporarily placed in bins with lids on the outside of the shed and then removed outside daily by the contractor. Manure is removed outside from each shed twice a week, and spent bedding is removed every 20 weeks. Sheds are cleaned, so that would be cleaned the same way in the end of laying cycle, each laying cycle. Manure is currently directly removed from the site and sent to a nearby composting facility that I showed earlier. The new shed will have access to the existing internal road network through proposed new internal roads. Those are internal roads here. Water will be supplied by 4 off-site bores under the existing water licenses, having a combined capacity of 290 megaliters per year. The proposed extension would increase the equivalent full-time staff from 20 to 22 persons. So the development application is supported by various technical assessment reports, including the Odor and Dust Impact Assessment Report. Kirsty, can you please bring the attachment 4? Thank you. So the Odor and Dust Impact Assessment Report considered impacts on the nearest receptors. The 2 closest sensitive receptors are shown on this figure. The first one is a caretaker's accommodation located where the piggery farm and composting facility is, and it is 420 meters southwest of the subject site. And the second one is located 885 meters west of the site. That's the second receptor. The report considered cumulative impacts from the existing poultry sheds, nearby piggery and composting facility, and concludes that there would be no significant change in predicted odor concentration from the proposed new layer shed. The applicant also submitted environmental assessment report that provide information regarding the stormwater quality management. And the report stated that there will be limited change in stormwater volume and velocity due to the ratio of the proposed shed to the site area. Stormwater runoff over the development site will be directed as sheet flow through grassed areas within the range areas before discharging into the natural drainage lines on the site, and vegetated surfaces within the range areas will treat sheet flow, filter out sediment and other pollutants, and reduce velocity. This development application was referred by the applicant to the State Assessment and Referral Agency for assessment of the environmental relevant activity and impacts on the transport network. State Assessment and Referral Agency had no requirements. The development application is impact accessible and has undergone public notification. 2 submissions were received opposing the development. 1 of the submissions was not properly made, and 3 submissions were received supporting the development. The main issues raised in the submissions opposing the development relates to the odor impact from the composting facility located at 601 Homestead Road, where spent litter from the existing poultry farm is deposited. The issues raised by the submitters are discussed in this report, and the proposed development is considered to generally comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks of the Toowoomba Regional Planning Scheme. Where applicable, the development can be conditioned to comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks. Accordingly, it is recommended that the proposed development to be approved, subject to reasonable and relevant conditions.
Thank you. Shakita, is there questions for the officer, please? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, Shakita, thank you very much. Could you indicate on the map where the submitters are? Could that be picked out on that map?
It's not on that map. Please, Kirsty, can you bring up attachment 2, please?
Or perhaps how close they are to the...
I will show on the map.
Thank
yes,
you.
Sure. So, the opposing submitters, one of them is located 8,421 meters southwest from the subject site. And another submitter is located 16,000 meters from the subject site.
Just to follow up, if I could, thank you for that. You mentioned a submitter, one of the concerns was around the odour from the composting facility. It's an existing facility, I would assume, and we're talking about less than 6% growth in the birds. So what additional impact would there be on the composting facility?
Well, for you, Madam Chair, that would be the only increase in manure
So therefore,
amount.
Madam Chair, if I could, so that's why the report from, there's a group called Astute, that's right?
Yes,
There was
Astute, yes. that's
Astute?
right. Yes.
That would explain, as you've mentioned, that there'd be negligible difference in...
There would be a negligible difference in odor concentration. That what was stated by the reporter and dust report. But I would like to actually add an environmental officer on that one. Maybe he can explain better.
Thanks.
Welcome, Luke. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors and everyone else in the room. Yes, Astute Environmental provided an odour impact assessment, which I reviewed as part of the application, and the application assessment was primarily focused on the impacts of the development and odour occurring at the development site and what that impact may mean in terms of cumulative impacts from the development site leading off. And I'm sure my planning colleagues behind me will discuss, if need be, in that when we receive a application and a development is having to, or is proposing to take a particular component of their site off to a different development which has a lawful use, then we're not assessing that other lawful use for its ability to manage, contain and work that use. That's not within our mandate. We're not allowed to do that. So the report that was provided by Astute actually did go a little step further, and it did include an assessment in section 3, table 3.1 and figure 3.1 that looked at not only impacts from odour for the current development site with the proposed one shed, but actually included an assessment of additional impacts around what would this one additional shed have to the cumulative odour sources and therefore impacts on receptors. And that report, which we've agreed to and endorsed, provided that there would be negligible to nil odour impact change on any of these sensitive receptors from the single shed being proposed on the development site. Keeping in mind too that when we're assessing this too, you were about to speak, I apologise, but when we're also assessing odour, and this has been confirmed through myself in speaking with the air quality expert at the Department of Environment and Science, is they do have to be considered very technically on different odour streams. So very technically speaking and very correct application of odour impact assessment, we can't really include odour from birds and compare chicken manure and then compare it with piggery manure because they are completely different odour characteristics. But again, the applicant submitted a report to support their application that discussed that cumulative impact and therefore what would that mean for odour impact assessment on receptors.
Just to follow up if I could, Mr.
Donald,
Chair, if I can. Thanks very much for that explanation. Is there anything have we put anything in the conditions that would be different to what the existing use is as a result of this application?
No, because the reports were finding that there was very, very negligible increase in odour at a very, very short distance, and the shortest distance being SR1 on the map on the screen up there, and that is a receptor located on the site of the piggery/composting facility itself. So that had an increase of 0.3 odour units as a result of this chicken shed, and the proposed chicken shed is relatively close to it and in line with that particular boundary. Every other receptor had a 0 increase in odour.
Okay. Thanks for that. If I just one final one, maybe a question for the applicant when they get to speak, if they are, just to understand for councillors what, if any, mitigation measures are in place or what practices have changed over time, considering the use, prior use and existing use that's there, not necessarily just for this application, but what they have done to mitigate some of that. So it's really a question, I guess, for the applicant.
Yes.
Thanks.
The applicant did provide an environmental assessment report, which includes management strategy in the rear of the report in section 3.5 regarding manure management, dead carcass management, et cetera, on there, which we found that to be acceptable and we endorsed that report for ongoing management of the site.
Thanks, Vic. Councillor McMahon.
Stay there. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I take your point that 590 to 620, and if you've already got odour there at 590, it's going to be a negligible increase, and that's valid, but you've got to submit a 16 k's away who's got issues with the odour as it is. So I guess I just want a bit of clarity around, we're only talking about this new shed today, right? The existing stuff that's already there is, not what we're here to discuss, but still, if there's people 16 k's away that are having issues with the smell, can that form any part of our discussion today? Can I just have some clarity on that?
As I understood, the issues with Odor are coming from composting facility, which is operating under the different approval. And currently the issues with Odor being investigated by Department of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Okay, so that you're saying that one 16 kilometres away is a water issue?
No, I said that the Odor issues are investigated by Department of Agriculture and Fisheries because that site is operating under the separate approval and also under environmental relevant activity for so for piggery farm, for intensive animal industry.
Okay, sure. So I just want to take you back to the smell. That we're saying that they can smell this 16 kilometres away.
Yes, but they can, when the Department of Environment and Science investigated this issue, they found out and responded to the submitter that the odor that is coming to their site, or they experiencing odor concentration from composting facility.
Okay.
And currently that is being investigated by Department of Agriculture and Fisheries.
The odour issues are being investigated
Yeah,
by
sure.
the Department
But, I mean, that also, we're passing the buck to state government, but it's, we're the ones who have got the planning approval here. So you're saying we shouldn't take that into account because it's state government?
I think, Luke, you've made a
If I
comment
may.
before you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to have clarity here.
Yep, sure. When it's an MCU approval and also an ERA approval over a particular development site, and that would be the composting facility, it is council's view, including officers from our environmental health section as well as our compliance section, development services compliance section, as well as myself, that the ERA takes precedence over that, and it's a matter for the state to look at. I know that there are differing opinions over that, but that has been discussed between council officers and DES previously, and also follow-up conversations that council officers have had throughout this year with DAF specifically about the composting facility itself. So, when we have a complaint regarding a composting facility, then the complaint and the investigation that follows relates to, okay, well, what's the approval? That's got an ERA. The ERA takes precedence. Therefore, the investigation is done by the state regulatory body in that particular instance. In the assessment that we're looking at now, the odour source itself that's causing the complaint is coming from the composting facility, and that cannot form part of my assessment and advice to our planning team, who therefore make judgment and reporting today about whether or not the shed can go ahead.
Okay, and the difference is going to be negligible with this shed?
Yes,
Yeah,
that
sure.
is correct.
Thank you for clarifying that. May I have a follow-up, Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. If I could take you to attachment 2, item 4. I'd just like some clarity, please, around what is a wetlands and waterways buffer that this shed sits right next to but not on, and what is an area of ecological significance buffer that this shed sits right in the middle of? Please.
According to submitted ecological assessment report, this area was cleared actually in 1979. So it's now being cleared. About 61 trees that grow in that area will be removed for location of the shed and also asset protection zone. But the applicant proposed to plant about 500 trees within the free-range areas to the north of the shed and south of the shed. There is an overland waterway path here, and the applicant is proposing to construct the access road, or how they say it's a dirty road, and construct the culvert over that overland path, waterway path, which is actually accepted development subject to requirements for waterways and waterway and barriers works. But it is assessed by state, and according to the application, it meets all acceptable outcomes and would not require an application.
So just generally, what's the difference between buffers and the actual area, like the area of ecological significance and the buffer of area of ecological significance?
I will ask Luke to address your question, if it's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. It's basically, as you're reading it literally, it's a buffer towards an area of higher importance for it. So the area shown on the map there, which is the lighter green shade, at one point council would have deemed that to have enough value that it would be considered, if we look at our planning scheme for avoiding development within or minimising impacts towards that area there, then the site, I don't want to push this at the top button. Oh, the big fat button. Okay, so if we're looking at our proper areas of ecological significance, that would be there and there. And so then we're looking for how the development would respond towards being here, and would a development here in a buffer zone cause any lack of protection to another area, for example. Same with the waterway. So is there sufficient space between where an activity is occurring and the areas of higher importance for it?
So he's planning
it's
a
not as
500.
higher importance as
Sure.
the major areas. It's just trying to see what space have we got.
His planting of 500 trees, you're saying satisfies the fact that it's in an area of ecological significance buffer?
Buffer, yes.
Yeah.
The applicant submitted a tree retention survey plan as part of their environmental assessment report, which proposed the clearing of surveyed a total of 116 trees and proposed the retention of 57 of those 116, plus the landscape plan was proposing an additional 500 trees to be planted. That meets the requirements of our acceptable outcomes, which talks about minimising impacts within an area where development is suitable.
Thank you for those clarifications. I appreciate it.
Councillor Vonhoff and then Councillor Carroll-Taylor.
Madam Chair, if given that Councillor Taylor might have to leave, I'm happy for her to ask her questions before mine.
Great, thank you, lovely.
Thank you, Councillor Vonhoff. The composting facility that's causing the issues, whereabouts is it? Will it be used for the same, through you, Madam Chair, sorry, will it be used for this shed as well as the other sheds?
For you, Madam Chair, yes, the applicant noted in their planning report that the manure will be removed from the site to the composting facility across the road.
So my concern, and the concern that's come to us from the submitters, is that the composting facility isn't working the way it should at the moment, and it's still causing odour, and yet we're saying that this has nothing to do with the decision we're making today, but I believe it probably does, because if they're going to use the same composting facility and it's not fulfilling what it should to stop the odour, then I believe it is part of the decision.
I think I might get the General Manager to comment.
Yeah,
Councillor Taylor.
look, what I think the officers are trying to say is that the composting area is part of an existing planning approval with ERA approvals
I
as
do
well,
understand that.
and there are strict requirements on the management of that. Councillors may remember 4 years ago, we took a bus trip out to have a look at a number of the poultry farms, and this was one of them. And we actually went and had a look at that composting area. I'm pretty sure it's the same one.
It is, yeah.
And we drove around it, might even have gotten out of the bus, and it was very tightly managed and being run in a very, what looked at that stage as a very professional way from an amateur's viewpoint. And the odour was not a problem on that particular day. But The other issue about the planting of trees, it's interesting, we were told when we were on that trip that chooks are agoraphobic.
Yeah, they might be trees.
And they need trees to cover the sky because they're afraid of open sky. So, because obviously that's where some danger comes from. So the planting side of it would have been done anyway, I think, by the owners of the property on that basis. But to cover off, I think there's nothing that we could add to the well, we can't anyway legally, but there's probably nothing we could add to the approval of that composting area that isn't already covered in the existing approval and in the existing state government approved ERA. So I think that's why I think the officers are saying that we can't sort of do anything additional about that, and we're not setting up a new composting area as part of this approval. That the waste will be going to that existing composting area.
Thank you, General Manager Stewart. I agree, it's very professionally run and it's a very good facility here, but it just does concern me a little bit that we've got submitters that are talking about something's obviously failed with the composting facility. And it just, I do apologise, I have to go, but it just does worry me that something's not right, and I guess that the right agency is the state government to follow that up, I suppose. And maybe it's prevailing winds, or I don't know. But
well, we might follow that. Well, we won't, not might. We will follow up.
Thank you very much.
That issue and see what can be done about that, and track that down as a particular issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summers. And I think, you know, the trees will make an enormous difference to this area to perhaps even capture some of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, to Luke, perhaps. Would it be possible for you to identify on a map for us where Perry's Gully and Spring Creek are located? And then I refer to the environmental assessment report that's been provided to councillors. And that states that the biological integrity of the aquatic ecosystem is likely to have been adversely affected by historic uses. Downstream water may be used for agricultural production, and in major creeks and rivers may be used for stock and domestic use, including drinking water. As there are no on-site or immediately downstream wetlands, environmental values have not been identified, nor will they be impacted by the proposed development. So my two questions are, does council accept that assessment? And my second question is, as raised by one of the improperly made submissions, does council conduct water quality testing?
Is that a question for you, Luke, do you think, or Shakira?
For you, Madam Chair, the first part of a question regarding the Spring Creek, as I understand that Perry's Gully and Spring Creek is a one water flow body located west of the subject site, just over here. It's about 3,800 meters from the development site.
Thank you.
And Councillor, thank you. We did endorse the environmental assessment report, therefore we do accept that part of the report as well. Does council perform water quality monitoring itself? No, that would be a particular condition of approval if it was so written, that would be on a specific requirement by an applicant under specific rainfall, surface water quality events. Water quality is more so a matter for the state to manage than a particular council, particularly matters within waterways that are also owned by the state. It's considered a state resource. The environmental protection policy for water, which includes water quality limits, does not devolve water quality monitoring for catchments to a council to do.
Okay.
So we may do that on a watershed point, for example, a dam catchment, but that would be for other matters that specifically fall under council's jurisdiction, for example, drinking water quality. And that would then follow up with particular forms of treatment. But no, we don't go out and do water quality monitoring as part of our assessment for a development application.
Okay, thank you. And just a subsequent question then, because this report says that it's not used for drinking water, those waterways, council will not be conducting those tests.
Not specifically for that reason that we wouldn't do any tests. We did not do that as a course for any single development application. So maybe I'm not understanding your question.
No, you were saying that if there was a development that would affect drinking water, then that does fall under the purview of council, right?
Yes.
And thank you, Stuart. And this assessment is saying that those creeks identified historically were used for stock and domestic use, including drinking water, but are not currently used for drinking water.
Not that I'm aware of for council resources, no.
Thank you.
My example that I was giving was more prefaced to something like Lake Perseverance,
Yep.
et cetera, where we have a large body of water.
Thank you to you all.
Councillor McMahon?
Chair, thank you for letting me ask another question. I don't wish to cause any problems with our staff who do a wonderful job, but I have to bring this up. Myself and I assume all the other councillors were contacted with a letter from the submitter, who I believe is here today, with a letter from the Department of Environment and Science, the Queensland Government, in response to his odour nuisance complaint. He sent that letter through in an attachment, which I will quote: "The Toowoomba Regional Council, the council, is responsible for taking any enforcement action in relating to environmental nuisance caused by that composting activity. You can contact the council 131872, etc." They're saying it's our problem, you're saying it's their problem, and I'd really like some clarification on who controls the odour caused by this composting facility after rereading that letter from the state government saying it's council's problem.
I think we might pass that to Luke.
Thank you, councillor. I'm aware of that correspondence. I've received copies of the attachments that are following up for that as well. The person from Department of Environment and Science was Miss Alison Walton.
Yes.
And Environmental Health, and one from our compliance team, both senior officers or above, had a meeting with Alison Watson in November last year, and also follow-up discussion, I believe it was in very early February, late January or early February, regarding this particular piggery, and the advice from Alison Watson that there were some changes made to the Environmental Protection Act that meant that an ERA that was conducted on land adjacent to an approved agricultural use, which is ERA for piggery, would remove that ERA for the composting facility to be a particular document. This was detailed in a letter from one of the submitters, I believe, in one of their summary documents. Alison Walton from DES, her message to the owner, Mr. Hall, looking at the email here, was basically in reference to the same type of conversations. Alison, at the time of our meetings with DES, was similar to what she has presented in this email here, in that DES's opinion was that the compliance issue was going to default to council. Council at that meeting, particularly through our environmental health team and our compliance team, strongly objected to that at the meeting, and we presented evidence at that meeting. However, these emails from DES have still gone out to members of the public stating an opposing position to council's. In that, our position is that, no, then this would default to the operator of the ERA, and the ERA for piggeries comes under the jurisdiction of DAF, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the compliance matter therefore relates to that being a subsequent use adjacent to an approved use being a piggery. Following?
Yeah.
And so I can understand how you're reviewing that, and it certainly does appear, and I preface that at the very, very beginning, there's a differing point of view around this. Council's view from three different sections of council is that this matter is a matter for the state to enforce compliance on of the composting facility.
Sure. No, look, thanks for the detailed clarification, and it helps. I just I suppose we get pretty good at saying not our problem sometimes in state and local councils, and I just want someone to take ownership, because we've got people saying it's an issue and they're saying pass the ball around. But no, I'll leave it. Thanks for your
Thanks, Councillor. I'll just get the General Manager to make a comment there. Thank you.
I mean, normally these sort of jurisdictional things are sorted out in the legislation, and there may be a misreading of the legislation. Certainly, I'm assuming we're taking that on board and getting our own legal advice in terms of where that lies. It's important that we know who is responsible, because if we go out and enforce legislation that we do not have any powers to do, no head of power, that is ultra vires. Outside the scope of that act, we could find ourselves in trouble. And that's not a good place to be. And so I'm assuming, and I'll check up after this meeting, that we are seeking clarification and legal advice on that, because it's been happening on a few fronts, particularly with natural resources, where it's council's responsibility, when in fact it is quite clearly under legislation, the state's own legislation, that it is the state that's responsible. So this may be just another example of that. But certainly we'll follow that up, and we'll come back to councillors in an email on that one.
Thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate that. And, you know, while we figure out whose problem it is, we've got people 16 k's away being affected by the smell. So I suppose it comes back to that. Look, thank you for your help and your clarification.
Councillor Shine.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Between the submitter who is 18 kilometres away and apart from the submitter who is 8 kilometres away, are there any other residences?
Well, I did not investigate this matter, but obviously there are rural uses and dwelling houses probably between these.
Sorry, I can't hear, but you're saying there's a number of houses?
I didn't investigate if there are any other receptors between the opposing submitters and the subject side. However, there are rural uses and obviously dwelling houses built between that. But they were not included as sensitive receptors.
So there are, but you don't know how many?
No.
That's the answer?
Can I ask you to comment on that? Thanks, Lou.
Thank you, councillors. Figure 2.1 of the Air Quality Odour Report did identify 14 receptors, sensitive receptors. Definition of a sensitive receptor typically means, in this particular environment, a residential receptor. Thank you, perfect figure, spot on. So some of those receptors may be considered a caretaker residence at an off-site facility, but that would still be considered a sensitive receptor in terms of our assessment of impacts, odour, noise, dust, whatever they may be, upon them. So I think you're more than safe to assume that every single one of the points displayed on the screen right now is a dwelling house. It may be a dwelling house associated with a farming use, but it's a sensitive receptor that we're looking to see, would there be any increase in change over the current operations based on the addition of this shed?
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, thank you. I have two submitters here today, Mr. Peter Hood and Mr. Brenton Hall. You might both come up together, and that way so both of you have 5 minutes, and then we'll have some questions from the councillors. Councillor Bonhomme.
Madam Chair, while the gentlemen are coming up, can I just get confirmation through you to the General Manager that that letter was from the state government relating to whose responsibility it is to test and monitor the odour was in November, and now it's September the following year, and we're only now getting legal advice. Is that correct? And if that's the case, why the delay?
I have no idea. I'm not sure whether Luke knows. I have no idea. I didn't even know it was an issue until this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor. our conversations with Des regarding this potential change in legislation was around that first date in November on those emails. And that is firstly when I was informed of the change, but our compliance officers from the Environmental Health section, as well as from our Development Services compliance section, were already aware of it and already very comfortable with the idea that the matter should relate back to the congruent land use, which is piggery plus whatever this composting facility is now classified as. So legal advice back then wasn't deemed to be necessary because our team already had those internal discussions, reviewing the legislation and going, this is our position.
And was that fed back to the state government?
Yes, it was. I believe it was. It was, I won't say I believe it was. I was part of the meeting where we conferred that directly, face-to-face with Des, just up the road here in their offices in late November.
Okay, so with that...
Sorry, we will follow that up though. I'm interested myself now that I know about it, so I'll find out and I'll let councillors know.
Got a preference for who wants to go first?
Councillors, we are submitting an objection to the building of this additional poultry shed on the grounds that Alpair Proprietary Limited has not been able to meet its development conditions with the existing poultry sheds in regards to waste management. It has regularly affected the amenity of neighbours and those further afield with odour that at times most would describe as putrid. Odor accredited officers from the Department of Environment and Science found the odour is affecting our property, which is in excess of 15 kilometres from the waste deposit area, forcing us to seal up our home and having to use air conditioning or heating to escape the odour, instead of being able to open windows or doors for fresh air. We have known what it is like to experience hotel quarantine lockdown long before those exposed to COVID have. The Department of Environment and Science confirmed this in a document which I have and I have shared. The Department of Environment and Science officers met with the Toowoomba Regional Council on the 2nd of February 2021 and handed over the information in regards to this facility's odour breaches. Copies are also in my possession. To suggest that more odour won't be noticed in the scheme of things is ridiculous. Have they never heard of the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back? The only issue we have with this facility is in regards to its waste management. With only about 4% of the Australian land mass arable and only about 1% in the more intensively farmed areas like that south of Pittsworth, it seems incredible that they are determined to put it in this area. I'd just like to add one thing. I doubt that our property at 15 k's is even on your sensitive receptors map there, and there's certainly quite a number of homes between our place and the waste management facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm not against development, but when they first initiated this compost heap, we had a meeting at McLean's, gave us lunch and whatever. A firm from Brisbane told them that the flume would come out 600 metres to 800 metres and go up and dissipate. I said, that's a lot of bunkum. Smoke, information about November the 1st, I was sitting on the Noosa River and I got a phone call from the girl at the Environmental Department saying, I'm terribly sorry, but the government have changed the rules late at night. I cannot, and they were going to prosecute. They were wandering around at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. They said there's a problem. I'm not against development, but I'm sick of being told you people have got to have some balls and say, big fellas, there's a problem. And there is a problem. They know there's a problem. They shifted it from outside Pittsworth because they were worried about on Jentz's place. They shifted it so quickly to the existing site, which is halfway up on a side of a hill. Goes down. The water goes into Perry's Gully, which comes into part of Hodson's. We've had cattle, 2 calves. The creek ran, we went, wow, good to see water again. They walked through, I had to destroy them because they got an infection from walking through the water, from the water that was coming off that site and properties.
Now, I've never had to do that in my life, at home. Existing, when it was proposed, it was the Pittsworth Shire Council. 2 water tests a year were supposed to be done on Hodgson's Creek and at Perry's Gully on the Pittsworth-Clifton Road. So it looks as though that just went up in smoke. We blame the government. They should be doing the job. You've got to... I don't mind development, but when it's affecting people, I was awoken 3 times in a week, dry reaching at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning because of this stench. There's a problem. Why did they move the chooks out of Pittsworth? It was going down Perry's Gully, the same smell. Doug Cattell was on a bus the other day driving around Pittsworth, and then they went to McLean's and they came to home and then they went on. Doug said, oh, you got a problem here with this compost heap. Kent Antonio said, yes, we have, but we never admit to having a problem on the application form. He said, yes, we have a problem. He admitted it. So, look, I can talk black and blue. The infrastructure of roads, we've got a block up there beside the hill paddock. Now, this is the other important thing. If you own a land beside it, you get a letter. We were driving up to what we call the hill paddock. Here's the sign hidden under a wilga tree. And the other sign was on a disused road, Hayden Road. Neighbour up there now, sitting in the back, he knew nothing about it. I rang another neighbour on Felton Homestead Road as I was coming in. Did you get a letter about that? No. So no one on Leslie Bridge Road knows about this because Odor doesn't stay within 800 metres of that compost heap. It's going 16 k's. Now, I can't believe that. The whole place now, depending on where the northeast wind is, you will smell it. Every afternoon, I hate summer now because of this. Down it comes, what I call the sea breeze. And it's just clockwork every time. Anyhow, thank you for listening.
All right, stay there, just in case we've got any questions from the councillors, guys. Thank you both. Councillors, did you have any questions for the gentleman? Yeah.
Question, thanks, Madam Chair, through you, probably to Mr Hood, I'd say. Just in regard to the previous approval and the testing of water, you aware of any issues that cropped up through that testing? Was there
I think it was quite a small setup in those days. It's gone from 0 tonne to 15,000. It's gone to 30,000 tonne now. And the development these blokes are doing, plus their pig manure, I think they're way over the development. There'll be more than 30 tonnes, 1,000 tonnes. I tried to find out today how much waste. I talked to one expert who runs a chicken farm, and he said 40% comes back as manure. So if the water that came off this, when we got this rain, that was the zone where it got the water. Came down in front on Volker Road, there's 300 or 400 metres of water. If you tested that, it would go whoompa with the crap. It's just like this coming off the sewerage. So, and then that comes down, cross a floodplain. You talk about no environmental pact, stock water. We all use it as stock water. If we were desperate, we'd use it as human water. The timber part of Balgownie West always used to have koala bears. You do not see one koala bear there now because of the odour of this stench as they've gone. And you talk about environmental studies, it's a joke. No one consulted down Leslie's Bridge Road, where most of the houses are, on this northeast wind. Didn't even know it was happening. Neighbour, 2 doors up from here, Charm Ryan, I rang her on the way in. I said, did you get a letter? She said, I knew nothing about it. So there's a big problem. You want to get, it doesn't even pass the pub test.
All right. Were there other questions for the gentleman? Thank you. No. Thank you, Mr Hood. Thanks, Mr Hall. Now, we do have Mr Ireland, General Manager. Did you want to make a comment?
I thought maybe it went through to the keeper a bit, but there was a comment about
Notification.
inadequate advertising of the
I was going to ask the
application.
applicant
I think we
about that.
need to cover off on that one.
Yeah, I was going to ask the applicant about it, but if the officers
Well, I think we would have made
would like to
sure-
respond to that,
Yeah, I
about
think
the
we should,
notification.
because we're responsible to make sure that it is properly done.
Could you advise us, Shakita, on the notification?
For you, Madam Chair.
I mean, you just heard, you understand that the accusers of hiding, or the applicant of hiding the signs and
Not notifying neighbours.
Well, the applicant submitted a notice of compliance at the end of the public notification. The applicant submitted a notice of compliance at the end of the public notification period and submitted the evidence that the public notification was properly made and complied with the requirements under the Planning Act. They did put the signs up the Homestead Road frontage and Hayden Road frontage as required. They advertised in the newspaper as was required and sent the letters to the adjacent property owners.
Okay, very good, thank you. All right, thanks, Shakita. Now we've got the consultant from PSA Consulting, David Ireland, who's going to present on behalf of the applicant. It is a nuisance. Need a pair of sunglasses. Thank you, David.
Thank you for the opportunity. David Ireland, I'm the Director of Planning at PSA Consulting, and we prepared the development application and pulled that together with a lot of the technical consultants. Just hearing today, and I thank the council officers for their thorough assessment of the application, and I endorse certainly the comments that have been made thus far with respect to the application. It does appear a little bit clouded between two different sites here. So the application we're here, and I think this has been acknowledged, is the addition of the one shed on that farm, and it's the 6% increase in birds on that property. So all the assessments with respect to that have been undertaken in accordance with all the environmental requirements, with all the legislative requirements, and demonstrate compliance with the relevant assessment benchmarks. As stated before, it's been referred to the state. The state has provided their concurrence in support of the application. So with respect to the farm, we have a solid grounds for approval and solid demonstrated compliance with the assessment benchmarks. The application did nominate that the manure from the farm would likely end up on the compost facility, because that's the compost facility that services McLean's operations in this area. It doesn't have to end up there. It could go to a different facility. It could go to a different site. With respect to the compost, we would say that, again, as has been acknowledged, that is subject to its existing approvals, its existing ERA. I understand the frustration at the buck parking. If there are issues with that, there are, it should be processes very clearly about how to manage that and how to follow that through. So if there are any concerns there, that needs to be progressed via that. Nothing in our application allows additional, beyond the approval limits, manure or litter to be taken to that facility. That's all governed by the existing approval. So anything we do on this or any other site doesn't allow us to automatically increase at the composting facility. So again, the right mechanism to deal with the composting is the existing approval framework. As I said, with respect to this site, we're very confident in our assessment. We're very confident in the technical assessments and the findings of those, and supported recommending the application for approval.
And the advertising?
Oh, the advertising? Yeah, so with respect to advertising, we engaged a company that specialises in advertising. To the best of my knowledge, it was all undertaken in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. That's what they're engaged to do, and that's what they do every single day. That involves putting the notices up on the road frontages, letters sent to the adjoining landowners, and this is all very defined in the Act, and the placement of the advertising in the locally circulating newspaper. So to best of my knowledge and from what we've seen from the evidence provided back from our notification company, that was all undertaken in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you very much, David. Councillors' questions? Councillor McMahon?
Chair, thanks. Yeah, look, very aware that you're talking about an extra shed and I'm up and on about a compost facility, but, you know, they're linked. But I just wanted to pick up on what you said, you know, 5.9 to 6.2, or you add zeros on that same thing, but you said the waste from this particular shed doesn't have to go to that composting facility. What are your options?
So within the poultry industry, a lot of the waste is taken to farms and sold direct to farmers and used as a land amendment material, soil amendment material, fertiliser. So that's one option. Other facilities doing very similar things with respect to composting. So there are multiple options available.
Councillor Von Hoff, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's fully formed in my mind yet. I understand, David, and I appreciate what you're saying about the composting facility being on the other side, and this application that's before us is dealing. So I understand that, but there is a link, as Councillor McMahon said, and then I hear what you're saying about you have options, but according to what we are assessing before us today, is it not the case that the option that has been presented to us is that the manure will be going to that composting facility that we're asking about at the moment?
Yeah, that was what we nominated in there,
Yep.
to provide some guidance with respect to forecasting traffic movements, understanding where operations were going, those other impacts associated with
Okay, thank
the
you.
facility.
So therefore, do we not have to make our decision based on the information that has been put before us in the facility that has been nominated in this paperwork?
Correct, yes. But it's saying that the facility that will receive that has the ability and the approvals to accept this waste at this point in time. And those impacts were assessed as part of the original application, and if there are issues there, they need to be managed in accordance with those frameworks.
And a supplementary, Madam Chair, through you, picking up on those last few words that you said, can you shed any light on this question about whose responsibility it is? State or local?
I won't wade into this debate between, I'll let the approval authorities sort that one out, sorry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's it for now.
Councillors, Councillor Shine?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. You heard Mr Hood tell us various things about the signs or lack of signs, and that they were down or hidden and so on. Have you got any personal knowledge about the signage situation there?
No, I don't. I would have evidence of it. To the best of my knowledge, I can't recall, but the company we engage, that is what they do. They erect signage for public notification in accordance with the requirements of the legislation. So that's what we ask, or we engage them to do.
That's what they're engaged to do, but yeah.
And I assume, yeah, but I don't have the evidence with me.
Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, so obviously we've heard from the submitters the concerns that have been raised there around the odours and the impacts that it has on their lifestyle. As an applicant, what reassurances do you give those around you of their lifestyle, or what steps that you will be taking to try and mitigate these concerns that they clearly have?
Yeah, so with respect to our application, and I'm not trying to be of use here, but with respect to our application, everything has been done in accordance with the relevant legislative considerations with respect to the odour impact assessment. The on-site operations of the farm are all done in accordance with our nominated environmental report, our environmental management report. It's also a heavily regulated operation, the poultry farm. So we have compliance audits with DES, with food safety authorities, with the customers, all those sorts of things. So it's a heavily managed and very regulated environment. With respect to on-site operations, there's a lot in the application material about removing manure from the shed, maintaining the temperature, all those sorts of things. So on-site, with respect to this application, there's a lot we've done and a lot will happen to ensure that the odour is effectively managed in the way that we've modelled. So I'm very comfortable with our application that there will be, from the technical evidence given to me, there'll be no unacceptable off-site impacts. The more broader issue I think you're getting to with respect to compost, I think we are reliant on the existing approvals and the existing compliance frameworks there, if there is a problem, to bring it into line.
Answer your question, Councillor O'Shea.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I'll go back to the question I asked earlier in regard to what mitigation measures are in place or have been put in place, the operation, and maybe it's not your role, David, to answer that question. And secondly, Mr Hood mentioned about the application at Pittsworth and the water testing, and I wondered whether there was some knowledge in the room in regard to the history of that and how it transpired that it's not anymore, and whether that's a regulatory authority that's not necessarily council.
You want me...
Well, I'm not sure whether you're the right person there or not.
The only contribution I'll make with respect to water quality is there's requirements, and we've recommended testing locations for the on-site operations. So that data is collected in terms of soil tests for nutrient loads and rainwater tests. So that is nominated and part of our application for this site.
So can you give an example of, or examples of what the operation does to mitigate odour, water quality, all those sorts of issues that are obviously concerns for some folk?
Yes, yep. So with respect to odour, the best way to manage odours from the poultry sheds is to manage the manure and keep it at the right temperature so it's not putrefying, it's not becoming highly offensive. So to do that, the aviary systems are very sophisticated to allow a lot of airflow through the sheds. The sheds are effectively where most of the manure deposition occurs. So we've heard that it's regularly taken out through the manure belts that sit underneath the aviary systems, take it to the end of the shed, and then that's put onto a truck and taken away. And that just keeps the airflow, keeps the levels of manure in the shed and around low. With respect to the external range areas and surface water, it's about maintaining vegetative strips and swales, directing that water flow around, trying to get good sheet flow away from the sheds. Again, most of the time the birds are spending is inside the sheds, and then they're ranging for a number of hours during the day where they're spread out across those areas. So getting rid of the concentration of the manure and the nutrients within the shed is central to sort of protecting the water quality outside. And as I said, ongoing water quality testing to make sure that the level of runoff, the level of nutrients on that soil isn't getting out of hand.
So, through you, Madam Chair, so when you say getting out of hand, you've obviously got a regulated or mandated range in which
Yes.
it needs to sit to. Who sets that range?
Look, I'm straying out of my area of town planning a little bit here, but I think it's through DAF is regulating any soil quality and managing environmental harm risks there. So
Okay.
there's...
Maybe Luke might know a bit more about that answer. Perhaps I'm not too sure in regard to that. I still would like some sort of knowledge around the water testing that was carried out in post TRC to what we don't do now, and whether that's now been mitigated because of the amount of testing that's done on site before the water leaves the area. I don't know where I can get an answer from that.
Luke, are you able to make a comment on that for Councillor McDonald?
Thank you, Councillor. Chair. As far as I'm aware, I have not seen any licence conditions that specifically relate to monitoring of water quality from a particular development site, other than for the development under application, which includes surface water quality monitoring at a particular point. Their environmental authority for the application under site includes 3 specific conditions, very stringently saying that contaminants are not to be released to groundwater, and also to surface water. We received an environmental assessment report and management plan, which included the nominated water quality monitoring points, including what I would term to be a background water quality checkpoint upstream of the development site, which is pretty much standard practice, and then a downstream water quality monitoring point. And that particular line along a particular watercourse on the development site, which is the line more so through the north of the site, would receive water runoff from 5 of the sheds and outdoor free range areas. So it's quite a good monitoring point. A practical difficulty in taking water samples is you actually need enough water flowing down a creek at a particular moment to get it, and then you also need enough time to get that particular sample to a laboratory within a particular holding time. And if you're monitoring for nitrates, phosphoruses, and fecal coliforms, they have a very, very, very short lab time. So there's a practical difficulty in getting a sample from one particular rain event, and presuming it could be quite a large one, maybe that blocks a road, all of a sudden you can't get actual samples in a particular moment. So there are conditions that do govern the requirements for contaminants. The default parameters would go back to EPP for water policy. We've endorsed a management plan that says for the site under application that we're agreeing with your water quality monitoring points and that you are to do them when you have surface water flow leaving the site through default endorsement of the environmental assessment report and the management actions within it. DAF, being the regulator of the ERA itself, proposed no changes to their current conditions, and their 3 conditions still stand.
Thanks.
I am not completely sure, for our submitters at the back of the room, which particular site you're saying Pittsworth Council provided water quality monitoring points for, and maybe one of you could clarify which site you were referring to. Was it the composting facility, the piggery, or the chook farm?
It's below the composting site on Vultures Road that runs into Ferry's Gully. So they went over Pittsworth Clifton Road where Ferry Gully or Spring Creek come through, they took tests.
Yep.
Creek at the bridge, they took tests. When it's running after a storm event, it's no use going up there now.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You won't get any water.
Yes. So in terms of what I can assess as Environmental Officer for Council in Development Services is I have to look at the application for which the site is occurring on. And so I'm looking at the impacts from the development site and the addition of 1 shed. And in terms of conditions relating to another site, that a proposed linkage is to, I don't have the ability to look at that particular site, i.e. the composting facility and whatever monitoring points are required there. That's outside the scope of this assessment.
Thank you. Luke, can I ask a question? I guess it's just a question in general about the biosecurity with bird flu and things, not necessarily relating to this and the increase in the application, but are those requirements still as stringent as ever? Has anything changed in that regard in the last few years?
Thank you, Chair. I am not sure. That's a little bit more of a health problem than an environmental problem, and sometimes there's crossover and I could advise, but in this instance, I can't. Maybe our applicant or the operator might be able to talk about biosecurity in a bit more authority.
Just make a correction, it's Vultures Road, not Hayden Road.
Volkers Road, not Hayden Road, for the water quality monitoring point of the composting facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Kent Antonio. I'm a staff member and family member of McLean Farms, 3rd generation poultry farmer. The question around biosecurity and avian influenza, it is a challenge we have for the poultry industry across the world. I myself sit on the board of the International Egg Commissions, which is a peak body for the entire world for eggs, and it is something we deal with all the time. How we manage it at this operation is firstly with the biosecurity fence, which was mentioned by the council staff earlier, 1.8 metres stopping cats and other wild dogs and that to enter. The whole site is a shower-in, shower-out facility. Nothing gets on. So the way we manage biosecurity is with 3 vectors. 1, you control people, control equipment, and you control vehicles. Nothing gets on that site where it hasn't been showered in, or the vehicles haven't been cleaned in, or any equipment hasn't been cleaned onto site. How we manage wild birds coming on site, we can't manage that. The trees we did plant at the advice of Penny McKinlay were non-bird attracting trees. However, it is something we cannot control, but the things we can control, we do. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I suppose it was just more out of curiosity than anything, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Kent, yeah.
Any further questions or?
Kent, sorry, Madam Chair, did you have any knowledge of the water testing, Kent, prior to?
No, I don't, Jeff. I'd have to ask other departments in my organisation. I apologise. Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah. Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Kent. Kent, same question. Do you have any other information about whose responsibility it is to test the odour compliance at the piggery, state government or Toowoomba Regional Council?
I think the frustration of the submitters is quite grounded in the sense that no one they get pinball backwards and forwards, and I don't look after that department, but from what I do see is it's a similar situation. So referring to David's comment that please refer it back to you guys to sort it out with council legislation.
Thanks for that, Kent.
No worries.
Councillor Shine, did you have a question?
No.
Is it to Kent or?
If I may,
Pardon, Councillor?
Yeah, if I just may ask you the same question I asked before. Do you have any personal knowledge of the signage issue that was raised by Mr Hood, or the lack of signage that was raised by him?
First, I've heard of it. We use the same people. In the past, we use the same contractors, and we've never had any troubles in the past. I'm not quite sure why there would be an issue if there was an issue. However, they would have evidence that we can produce at the requirements of council.
Thank you.
Councillor Mr Lister Taylor, sorry.
Thank you. There's only one Taylor here today, so. Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kent. Just going back to the odour issue. So the submitters have spoken today about, and I know we're talking only about the approval for this particular shed, but for the moment I just want to go back. Have you in the past received comment or objection to the odour of your facility submitters previously?
Yes.
Yes. And so then may I ask, what measures have you taken to mitigate that? Because to me, adding another shed would be cumulative in the issue. So what measures have you taken to mitigate the issue previously?
We detailed in that report there that the staff member from the council referred to before. If I don't mind, can I grab it off you, please? These challenges the gentlemen are referring to have been dealt with in the past, and they have had contact with our staff members within the business. I do know that, and again, I don't look after this department, but I will speak to my knowledge and only my knowledge and my truth. I do know they have changed practices like not turning on certain days or certain times to see if that had changed anything, if there are any issues. I don't have it to hand, I'm sorry. I'll have to refer to a later time. I'm not going to sit here and read a report. But we submitted that as part of the application for this improvement. Now, to speak to your second part of your question, that it does add to the compost facility. Again, we've outlined that it is a different DA, and it is being dealt with under its own development approval and authorities. And Councillor Von Hoff referred to who actually looks after that is to be determined. Increasing the bird numbers by 40,000 on this site, we are looking to reduce bird numbers at another site, so that the net effect for just this application is 0 extra birds in the whole scope of things towards the supply of that site. However, I did my numbers previously referring to Mr Hood's statement of 40% of manure of the feed is 40% is manure. On our 1.8 million birds throughout our Maclean Farms operation, it works out to 27,594 tonnes per year is going to that compost site, which is, as I said before, is 30,000 tonnes a year facility. So that is well within the ranges of our current approvals. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
2021-893 for development permit for material change of use impact extension to intensive animal industry. Can I have someone move the recommendation?
Madam Chair.
Sorry, beg your pardon, yep.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move a procedural motion that the question lie on the table, and that's because this councillor and perhaps others require additional information on the matter before the matter can be concluded. And so, and that would be concluded at a later meeting. And the reason for me moving that procedural motion, Madam Chair, is that we have to assess what is before us. And I fully appreciate, as I've said, that the matter before us is not concerning the piggery site, but there is an overlap here that's unresolved. And that is that the application that's before us today states that the additional manure would be taken to that compost facility. And we've got a situation, and while I appreciate the General Manager's commitment to follow up on the legal status of whose responsibility the management of the odour compliance is, it's unresolved. And that's a significant part of our considerations today, and it's pertinent. So until we know if it's the state government or the local government that has responsibility for that compliance, I don't believe that we have all of the information that we require as councillors to make a decision in this matter. And therefore I'm moving that procedural motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, my meeting procedure, I might need a little bit of advice from the acting CEO in terms of what needs to happen from here.
Well, you don't need a seconder to do a procedural motion, but the motion is to accept
that the matter lie on the table.
That it lie on the table, or the alternative is to defer the motion to another planning special meeting, which may actually be a better result.
Especially, Councillor McDonald, if other councillors have questions about water quality testing, for instance, that you've raised, beyond the compliance issue on the odour.
Okay. So do we need to vote on it? Okay. So we'll... So the acting CEO is just asking what's the statutory timeframes for consideration here?
It's an impact. It's impact assessment, so it's not deemed approval. We're not in deemed approval territory. However, the applicant would be free, I suspect, in terms of deemed refusal, but I doubt that would happen.
Is it, Madam Chair?
There is no urgency there.
Is it reasonable to expect that we can have that information within weeks?
Oh, I think we'll get it before then, but I think we just need to be careful that we are not making a decision about a particular application on the basis of considerations of another matter outside of that. That's the difficulty that we face.
That's right. And I really, in my mind, through you, Madam Chair, to the General Manager, they are distinct with a Venn overlap there. And until we understand and can be confident about whose responsibility that compliance is, it feels like we'd be voting on something that's unresolved, and we wouldn't be confident about who's actually going to be accountable for that testing.
Yep. Actually, I was just handed, through you, Madam Chair, I've just been handed an email from DAF, by the look of it, who is indicating in this email that they are in fact investigating the odour issues and I think the water issues, but certainly the odour issues. So they've taken that on. So I think that clarifies that maybe they now understand that it is their responsibility. This is in an email dated...
Could you please read that out for us?
Okay.
Dear and
Luke,
with the date?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the date. Tuesday the 7th of September. Dear Luke, since DAF gained responsibility from DES for the piggery compost facility at Felton in January 2021, DAF has received multiple complaints, mainly from one complainant. We have monitored the area during the evenings on the various occasions with no odour nuisance verified at a complainant's residence. DAF inspected the site in March and issued a letter listing various issues which need to be rectified to reduce odour emissions from the site. We have had regular communications and feedback from the Director regarding on-site management. Regards, Luke Boucher, Livestock Regulator, Agribusiness Policy and Industry Development, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. So I think that probably clarifies that point.
That does. That would have been pertinent, you know, an hour ago into the conversations. I don't know where that email was. Where was that email, actually, General Manager?
I guess it was on the file. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have to ask Luke.
Madam Chair, my point was that we didn't have clarification. That email has clarified it. So I withdraw my procedural motion.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Vonhoff. So with that, we have reinstated standing orders. Do I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor McDonald? Do I have a seconder? Councillor McMahon? All those in favour? It's carried. Councillor Shine, did you want your vote recorded?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Close the meeting. Thanks, everyone. 3:32.